A day of contradictions, war, diplomacy, and uncertainty in the Middle East. As the world watched for signs of peace, the Middle East was rocked by one of the most contradictory and consequential days since the conflict began on February 28th. Former President Donald Trump assured the world that hostilities were winding down, but even as he spoke, Iranian missiles were already in the air, targeting Tel Aviv. This is Matter Alerts, and I'm your anchor. Tonight, we'll break down the most complex 24 hours of this war so far. A day when declarations of peace and acts of war unfolded side by side, leaving the world more uncertain than ever about what comes next. Diplomatic announcements versus battlefield actions. The day began with a dramatic statement from Donald Trump on social media. In a post that quickly went viral, Trump claimed that recent discussions with Iran had been so productive that he was ordering a 5-day halt to all planned strikes on Iranian energy infrastructure. The announcement sent shockwaves through global markets. Oil prices fell, and stock markets rallied as investors anticipated a possible end to hostilities. For a brief moment, the world seemed to exhale, hoping for a breakthrough that could bring stability to a region long plagued by conflict. At a press event in Florida, Trump went further, stating that Iran had agreed never to pursue nuclear weapons and that his team, including close associates, had played a direct role in the negotiations. "They want peace," Trump declared confidently, painting a picture of imminent resolution. However, the optimism was short-lived. Iranian officials quickly issued a public denial. The foreign ministry in Tehran dismissed Trump's claims, insisting that no talks had taken place and accusing the U.S. of spreading misinformation to influence global markets. The Iranian parliament speaker openly challenged Trump's narrative, calling it a deliberate attempt to distract from the ongoing conflict and the mounting challenges facing both the United States and Israel. Missiles strike Tel Aviv. Within hours of these conflicting statements, the reality on the ground shifted dramatically. Iran launched a missile attack on Tel Aviv, causing significant damage in several neighborhoods and resulting in multiple casualties. Israeli emergency services responded to numerous impact sites across the city, highlighting the ongoing danger despite diplomatic headlines. The Israeli military confirmed that several missiles had evaded interception, including cluster munitions designed to inflict maximum damage over a wide area. One such weapon detonated inside a residential building, underscoring the evolving threat to civilians and the limitations of even the most advanced air defense systems. Military operations continue. Despite talk of a ceasefire, military operations on both sides intensified. The Israeli Defense Forces reported over 3,000 strikes on Iranian targets since the conflict began, averaging more than 100 attacks per day. These operations have targeted military facilities, weapons factories, and critical infrastructure across Iran. The scale and pace of these strikes are almost unprecedented in modern warfare, reflecting the intensity and complexity of the conflict. On the same day Trump announced a pause in attacks, Israeli forces struck gas facilities and pipelines in Isfahan, raising questions about coordination between allies and the true scope of any ceasefire. Was the pause only applicable to American operations, or was there a breakdown in communication between Washington and Jerusalem? The lack of clarity only added to the sense of confusion and uncertainty. Prime Minister Netanyahu addressed the Israeli public in a televised speech, emphasizing that military pressure would continue until Israel's security objectives were met. He referenced recent operations against Iran's missile and nuclear programs and signaled that further actions were likely. Netanyahu's language was not that of a leader preparing for peace, but of a commander determined to press his advantage while the opportunity remained. Iran's strategic messaging. Iran's response was calculated and public. Officials made it clear that the missile strikes were intended to send a message not only to Israel, but to the broader international community. Negotiation was off the table as long as attacks continued. Iran's leadership also issued strong statements condemning U.S. policy and accusing Washington of contradictory behavior. The Iranian parliament speaker went so far as to call Trump's statements deliberate misinformation aimed at manipulating global markets and distracting from the realities on the ground. This public exchange of accusations and denials played out against a backdrop of escalating violence, with both sides seeking to shape the narrative and influence international opinion. Iran's decision to launch missiles at Tel Aviv just hours after Trump's announcement was a clear signal that it would not be pressured into negotiations on terms it considered unfavorable. The humanitarian impact. Amid the military escalation, the human cost continues to mount. International organizations report that thousands of civilians, including children, have been killed or injured since the conflict began. In Iran alone, hundreds of children have lost their lives, with many casualties resulting from strikes on civilian areas. Rights groups are calling for investigations into attacks that may constitute war crimes, including a devastating strike on a girls' school in Minab City on the first day of the war. The suffering is not limited to Iran. In Lebanon, Israel, and other countries across the region, families are mourning loved ones lost to the violence. Hospitals are overwhelmed, and humanitarian agencies warn that the situation could deteriorate further if the fighting continues. The images of destroyed homes, injured children, and grieving families serve as a stark reminder of the real cost of war, a cost that cannot be measured in headlines or market movements. Diplomatic channels and global reactions. While Iran has engaged in talks with regional partners such as Egypt, Pakistan, and Oman, it continues to deny any direct negotiations with the United States. This gap between back-channel diplomacy and public statements reflects the complexity of the current situation, where genuine peace efforts are difficult to distinguish from political maneuvering. The international community is watching closely. European leaders have called for urgent negotiations, warning that continued conflict threatens not only regional stability, but also the global economy. Oil prices remain volatile, and analysts warn that prolonged hostilities could have long-term consequences for energy markets worldwide. The International Energy Agency has already stated that this energy crisis is structurally worse than the oil shocks of the 1970s, and major financial institutions warn that elevated oil prices could persist for years. The Gulf on edge. The conflict is not confined to Israel and Iran. Countries across the Gulf are feeling the impact, with Kuwait and Bahrain both confirming that their air defense systems have intercepted Iranian missiles and drones. Fires and damage have been reported at key industrial facilities, and emergency responders are working around the clock to prevent further disasters. The Gulf is not a bystander. It is a battlefield, with every intercepted missile representing a narrowly averted catastrophe for global energy infrastructure. Economic and global impact. Trump's announcement of a 5-day pause caused oil prices to drop and markets to surge, showing how much war risk is driving global prices. But Iran's public rejection of talks means the 5-day window is not a credible path to peace. It's a countdown to a possible escalation that could reshape the global energy landscape. A U.S. official confirmed that direct talks might take place within the 5-day window, but cautioned that nothing is final. If no progress is made, Trump's threat to obliterate Iranian power plants could return, risking a humanitarian catastrophe and severe international backlash. The information battlefield. What makes this phase of the conflict especially dangerous is the role of information and perception. Leaders issue statements, markets react, and the public is left to decipher what is real and what is political theater. Trump declared peace. Iran fired missiles. Netanyahu vowed to intensify strikes. Markets rallied. then hesitated. Diplomats are working back channels, while commanders target cities with cluster munitions. These are not isolated contradictions. They form a portrait of a conflict searching desperately for an exit it has not yet found. The next 5 days, uncertainty ahead. As the 5-day window announced by Trump ticks down, the world faces a period of heightened uncertainty. If no progress is made toward a lasting agreement, the risk of renewed military action remains high. The possibility of further strikes on critical infrastructure could trigger a humanitarian crisis and deepen the region's instability. The stakes could not be higher. Over 2,100 children have been killed or wounded, 3,000 Iranian targets have been struck, and missiles have fallen on Tel Aviv on the same morning peace was declared. Underwater mines have been confirmed in the Strait of Hormuz, and oil prices have swung violently on the strength of a single social media post. The world is watching, anxious and uncertain, as the clock ticks down. In summary, the past 24 hours have revealed a conflict defined by contradictions. Peace declared in headlines, war waged on the ground. As leaders issue statements and missiles continue to fall, civilians bear the brunt of the violence. The coming days will be critical in determining whether diplomacy can prevail or if the region will slide further into chaos. This is Matter Alerts. We will continue to provide updates on every development, every negotiation, and every consequence, until a path to peace is found. Stay informed and stay alert.